Hi, everybody. Welcome to Discover College Soccer. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Coach Dave Clarke from Quinnipiac. Welcome, Coach.
Morning, Matt. How you doing?
Doing well, thanks. Got a nice program up there in Connecticut. Congratulations on a successful season, winning your conference title. That's got to be good stuff for the girls up there.
Yeah, it was a good way to end the season. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's always good when you do something like that, and
yeah,
that's the aim of every program, I'm sure. But yeah, it was good.
right. Well, I'm excited to talk to you. You've been there over 20 years, which is amazing, especially in this day and age with all the coaching changes around. So you'll be able to give us some really unique insight into the program. But let's first start talking about recruiting. I mean, the season's over. It's college showcase prime time, right? So I'm guessing you're in the thick of it. Um, in terms of your timing and classes, are you still working on your 23s or is that pretty much done and dusted and you're focused on 24s? What's that look like for you guys?
No, we're still looking at 23. COVID obviously has impacted every team, so we're still in the midst of our players going to stay? Are they going to take their fifth year? The beauty of a school like ours and the way that we recruit is we're heavily in the sciences. So I recruit nursing majors, PA majors, PTOT, which is unusual for Division One. That's because it's the strength of the school. We've got two top 10, top 20 programs in nursing and PA. So we really go after players in those programs. So we do have players in the program that are here for 5, 6, and 7 years.
Hmm.
So that's the strength, but it also complicates because in the fifth year, sixth year, depending on where the players are in their clinicals and their rotations, they could have a heavy schedule where they're not on campus, or they could have a light one where they are, but then the hours are different. So, I'm sure we'll get into like one of our best players this past year, KK. She rarely trained. If she did, it was once a week. But then she was also starting rotations at 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. and going all day. And how she managed to put in the performances she did, it was incredible. But then next year, it could be even more demanding for her in her fifth year. So we have to weigh up a lot of those options. And then whatever we bring in 23, I have to wait to see what positions we fill before we really go after 24s. So right now, I think it's more year to year rather than 2 or 3 years out. We're not, I know the Power Fives and the rationale for why they do it, but we're really heavily reliant on the academics. We need to see the grades in the senior year, late into the junior year to make sure they get in, but then also seeing where our current players are in their schedule.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Um, with all the different showcases and things that go on, are there kind of must-hit events that you try to get to every year to look at players?
Well, I'm also involved with an ECNL club, so the ECNL is definitely high on the list. Just if not for me per se, is like when I'm there, I'm not necessarily looking at all the players. I'll have one of the other assistants I'll attend. I'm more networking. I've found over the last couple of years, and especially through COVID, and I've also had a role with the U17, U20 national team. So I've had direct sort of corresponding with coaches, about players going to the Power Five schools. So that opened my eyes a little bit to the networking aspect. So I've started to focus a little bit more on reaching out to directors of coaching,
Hmm.
trying to get them to understand what we offer as a school academically, rather than going to that tournament trying to find players. I'd rather identify. If I email a DOC in California or down south or the Midwest, I'm not asking them for their best players. I'm actually asking them, tell me who your nursing major is. Tell me if you have a kid that's a PA major. Tell me if you've got a kid that might be interested going on to the East Coast. I had that with a DOC from Colorado this week. She gave me 2 players that were in those majors and wanted to play on the East Coast. So that for me has been sort of a better way to spend the time at ECNL. We do look at the GA. We do look at other events. We're trying to find that player that nobody else is really looking at. You know, a player that flies under the radar, late developer. You know, because for us, if you look at where we are in the Northeast, the level of competition, even with ECNL clubs, it's very, very competitive. So to try and get the top players, even the top players in CFC, are going to, you know, my players are going to Purdue, they're going to Boston College, UConn, schools like that. It just, now you're getting down to player 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, which, if you want to really succeed, we need to be trying to get that top tier player, that top 5 player. And that's not easy in a very competitive environment. So trying to find a player, you know, we picked up a player from the West Coast that came, recommended. I traveled out, watched there a couple of times. So for us, that's been more beneficial. So it's trying to narrow the focus rather than just broad ECNL.
Yeah, no, I get that. Well, what about camps? Do you guys run your own camps? Do you or your staff work other camps? Do they fit in at all to your recruiting?
We do our own clinics. We try to do 2 or 3 a year where the numbers are actually are there, you know, for us to bring players in. We run it more like a training session, so it's not like 50 or 60. We try to go 24 to 32 if we have 4 goalkeepers, and then run it like a training session. So not a money making event. I'm not a big fan of the big business clinics, but I do, you know, let the assistants attend other events. You know, I will go in if there's players there and there's a market there, whether it's 1 player or 2 players, or just to showcase the school. So I never say no on anything, because you just never know where you're going to make a connection, whether that's with a player, whether that's with a sibling of a player, or whether that's with a coach or a club DOC. So I never shut the door on any event whatsoever.
Okay. Well, looking at your roster now, it looks like you got a couple internationals, a good bit of Canadians actually. How does international recruiting kind of fit into the overall landscape for you guys?
Well, again, going back to you said I've been here at the school a long time. So what that's also afforded me is a chance to reset the program every so often. We're in a stadium. This was our 5th year in the brand new stadium that you see behind us. So when we started to move in a direction of where we were in terms of our level of support, we looked at resetting the program probably about 2015, 2016. So we recruited to the stadium. We tried to target markets, you know, so we were like, all right, we're not getting the very best ECNL. How can we get better players and still be able to compete? So with that, we made connections with a few clubs like Vaughan, Aurora, and Markham in Canada. And that first class of Canadians ended, Nadia Gill was the first one, and she had played with the U17s and U20 national team, which then opened up the door for others. And then subsequently, the players that we brought in, like Liv Scott, Marky Belleri, Courtney Chokol, Malia Di Rosario, who unfortunately had a lot of injuries in her time, they're all U17 and U20 Canadian national team players. Now, yeah, we're getting that level of player, but they're also the majors, the nursing, the business, the health science. So they're not just coming in purely for soccer. They did come in. They actually all attended a clinic, the last clinic we held on our grass field, our old grass field. But they saw the school, they saw the medical school, what we offered, and once that opened the door, now we've been able to get in other internationals. So it's a good market for us. And then our ice hockey program is one of the best in the country. You know, the men are number 2 in the country right now. And they've been to a number of Final Fours and are becoming a hotbed of NHL players. So for us in Canada, it works out well. We don't have to sell the school, because so everywhere you go, someone knows a player who went to the school, both the men's and the women's ice hockey team. I was up in Nova Scotia. I was actually at a soccer event in Nova Scotia, but on one side of the facility was an ice rink, and on the other side was an indoor soccer field. And I'm with my Quinnipiac I don't have Quinnipiac soccer on it, but the logo. And a number of people that were coming up to me, and I was like, oh, I'm loving this. Until they realized I wasn't the ice hockey coach. They thought I was the ice hockey scout and not the soccer one. So, but that to me is like in Halifax, Nova Scotia, I'm at an event and everyone knew the school. So that gave me another insight into that branching out of players. So we've been fortunate now. We've added Vancouver. Obviously, Ontario is a big draw for us, but there are other areas that we're going to expand into or try to make connections with too.
Okay. Well, you talked a little bit about it so far, but let's learn a little bit more about the school. I'm down here in Florida, so I'm sure we've got some girls in my club who wouldn't have the first idea about Quinnipiac. So, you've been there a while. Give us some good insights about the school. What are some awesome things that maybe I'm not going to learn just by going through the website?
It's a small school in terms of the location. It's not as big as the big state schools. But having said that, we're about 8,000 to 10,000 undergrad and grad total. We'll get to about 12,000. It's a very self-contained campus. We're surrounded by a state park that everyone comes to see, especially in the fall. The rivers runs around it. We've got 3 campuses. The main campus, York Hill, which is where the ice hockey and basketball arena and the juniors and seniors live. And then we got the medical school, which now is we have medicine, engineering, and law. There's only 3 schools in Connecticut that offer medicine, engineering, and law. There's only 50 in the country that offer them. The 2 others in Connecticut, one is the University of Connecticut, UConn, which everyone knows, and the other one's a little school 10 minutes away called Yale. So that's the level of school academically that we've sort of developed into over that time. One of the other things is we're only about 15 minutes away from ESPN, so in Bristol, right down Route 10, and our broadcast journalism and sports journalism and all of our production majors, that's also one of the national programs too. So we're able to attract players in that are interested in all sorts of careers in the media, in TV and journalism and film. And then by extension, I'm sure at some point in time you've heard of the Quinnipiac poll. It's always running, especially around any election time. That's another one for our political science. So students come in from all over the country that are interested in that program. So we offer top-notch health science, nursing, PA, as I mentioned before, PT and OT. They're all some of the best programs in the country. And with the medical school, it's just an easy sell. We're sort of based in an easy location, an hour and 15 minutes outside New York, an hour and a half from Boston. So in terms of the Northeast corridor, we can go now to players, West Coast, Midwest, down south, and say, listen, if you're interested in a school that's close enough where you can travel, Philadelphia's not too far. We're on that Washington, D.C. corridor. So you can do a lot within a 2-hour, 3-hour train ride, bus ride, which is, unlike some of the big state schools and schools across the country. And that's become a selling point. We're not able to offer, year-round sunshine like you down there, but there's definitely a selling point in terms of the academics of the school, the location, and especially when you get into business, being close proximity to New York City and Wall Street. And then corporations, Fairfield County is one of the richest county, if not the richest counties in the country, where a lot of companies have their headquarters there, especially in Stamford. And we're only 40 minutes from Stamford down 91, 95. So if you're a business major and you want to work on Wall Street, the MBA program as well, the marketing, you've just got the biggest companies in the world at your doorstep. So there's a lot to sell. It's taken me a long time over the years to sort of narrow down, hey, in business, we can sell this. We've got a law school, we've got a nursing, we've got a medical school, and the location. Everyone complains about where they live, but truthfully, one of the reasons I've stayed is the location of the school, the quality of the school, the philosophy of the school, the academics we offer. I'm an educator at heart too. I'm one of a dying breed where I was an educator before I was a coach, and that was what That was always what I wanted to do, combine both. So I value the education of the school. I did my master's at Quinnipiac in journalism. So I value the education program that the school offers, and all 4 of my kids are at Quinnipiac. They didn't look elsewhere. One plays as well, but they didn't even want to look at other schools. They'd grown up there, and they had their programs and the education that they wanted. So that's probably, you know, the best testimonial I can give, is that my 4 kids all wanted to attend the school too.
Absolutely. Well, that's it's a nice little bonus, right? So you got,
Yeah.
like you said, you're a walking testimonial. Well, you've mentioned it a little bit, but I'm gonna combine these questions. But you know, it sounds like there's a lot of academic rigor there, especially in those medical programs and stuff. So how do your student athletes really balance their academics and athletics, and what does that do for your schedule during the season in terms of when practices and leaving for games and all that kind of stuff?
Well, first of all, in terms of the programs, because you know, try to explain to someone why we have like nursing or PA would be top 10. They move in and out. They've been top 20, let's say, academically and ranked. Is the demands of the SAT scores and the GPA required to get in, the demands of the GPA required to stay in the program. So for Quinnipiac, most programs, you have to have a 3.3 GPA to stay in. So in those high health science, why 3.3? They did research many years ago that 3.3 was the GPA that almost guaranteed you're going to pass your boards and be certified when you're done with your degree. Other schools are since know that other schools that are rivals against us, that they require like 2.5 or 2.7. So that's the first difference. It's the quality of the student that we bring in. 2, I never compromise on the students. So rarely do I've always said I don't really recruit liberal arts, and I don't recruit business undecided. I'd rather have 10 nursing majors than 10 liberal arts students, because they're more focused, they know what they want, they're more disciplined coming in. We had a class last year that, you know, the 5 of the players had the grades to go to an Ivy League institution. So we compete with schools more, our peer schools for us as an institution, of the likes of Lehigh, Colgate, Northeastern, Hofstra, Wake Forest. So that's our peer group. Obviously, those schools are in bigger conferences, but that gives you an idea of the academic standing behind the scenes that we're competing with. When we come in, if I bring in players 2.0 GPA, 800 SAT, they might be better players, but they cause problems off the field. If there was one thing that I said, you know, if you were to ask me why I've stayed 22 years, it's because the players graduate and they stay there and they do their masters, and we've got doctors and lawyers that have all gone through the whole system. So the kid that causes problems is going to be the kid with the 2.0 liberal arts, not as focused as the nursing or pre-med kid. It's difficult in terms of the team, because we have a practice slot 2 to 4, so really 1 to 5 every day, which coincides with clinicals and rotations. So I have a schedule up in my locker room. I'm missing players on Monday. Which players am I missing on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday? We tend not to have them miss Wednesday game day. But we do have players that could be coming late, not necessarily at warm-up, always coming in their medical fatigues. So I've had a couple of assistants who have been newer in the last few years ask me, well, you know, why can't we get them here all the time? I go, well, we wouldn't even have them in the school if we didn't sell them on what we're offering. So I'm not going to change now. It's almost run with an Ivy League type mentality. When they're there, they're there. When they're not there, they're not there. We could go early in the morning, but then training at 9 a.m. doesn't work with everyone else's schedule, and you have other issues. They're not sleeping right, they're not eating right. So most games are 2 o'clock till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So if we train during that time, we have fewer conflicts overall. But yeah, it's not always ideal the day before the game not having 1 or 2 of your best players around, but they also turn out to be the best students and more focused. When they come in, if they only have a half an hour window to come in and work, they come in, they do it, they lift, they train, they warm up, they get out, they do the ball, and they leave. So over time, I probably could list like 5 or 6 of my top players down the last 15 years, and they've all been in those programs where we haven't had them every day of the week. So it's not ideal, but it's part of the overall philosophy of the program. It's not going to change. I said it to my administrator the other day, unless they turn around and tell me, we have to win. But then we've also shown that we can win with that type of kid. So we're that Division 1 school that if you're a nursing major, PT, OT, and pre-med, we want you, and we'll work around with you on your schedule.
No, that's great. Well, let's talk a little bit about the soccer side of things. We mentioned you guys had a great season. You know, in terms of your roster, and you were talking about 50 years, and I know it's been a weird time for college coaches in roster management because of all those COVID changes and things like that. But is there a roster size that you try to hit every year that you find is ideal?
We tend to work around 25, 26. Our numbers are based on what the overall numbers of the school, so it fluctuates. It's a little bit bloated now in terms of numbers, but I'm not any of the players that have an extra year of eligibility. We've left it up to them to decide for the most part whether they want to stay or not. I'm not going to cut those players, and we've a couple of training players that have been great. They know their role within the team, and especially when we don't have players at practice, as mentioned previously. So they're value to the team, as we always have the ability to play 11v11 and train 11v11 when needed. Ideally, in the perfect world, you have a roster of 22 to 24, but those days are gone. And truthfully, that was more of a soccer perspective, like a tournament perspective, that, I really only want 18 to 22 players because of management. But over the course of a season, as you see with most professional teams, you need a bigger squad, you need more depth in every position. So 25, 26 is manageable, but you're getting up into that 26 to 30 range right now in this era. But once the sort of COVID years are over, in terms of eligibility, I want to keep it to about 25 to 27 max. Because when you throw in, you're going to have 3 or 4 goalkeepers, and then all of a sudden if you have 2 to 3 injuries coming and going, never mind long term, now you're down to 18 players, so you're really talking 9v9. So that's manageable. I hope we're never told you have to carry 30 plus. I know there are some schools like that, but it's also giving everyone a positive experience. So planning is always difficult when you've got high numbers, because you want to make sure that Matt plays 10 minutes, Dave plays 10 minutes, and you're balancing moving in and out, but you also want to make sure that the intensity is high enough that you're playing at the intensity that you require in the game. So it's a lot of management, but for me, that's part of the job. It's not an issue. That's just something, you spend time working out lineups, training, activities, rotations, ratios, not an issue for me.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned earlier when we were talking about tournaments and stuff that you have staff that help you out as well. So can you talk a little bit about the staff you have and the roles that they play?
Yeah, we've been fortunate that we get a lot of support at the school in terms of hiring, and then also myself, I'm very much of that approach that I've been around successful teams with US soccer, and then you look at the role that the support staff play. So we've always had access at Quinnipiac to different things. So I'll go into like nutrition or psychology, things like that. But I've embraced it. So when I look, I have 2 full-time assistants. This year was more the newest assistant was on the field. Prior to that, she had been a goalkeeper coach with a sports psych background. So I try to have different areas. So a little bit of a different personality to me, a little bit of a different role or how they see the game. So I'm one of those. I like a little bit of the arguments, people questioning why we do things. So we're not the same. The three of us on staff, full-time three, are not the same. We have different views of the game, how it should be played, but agree on the overall philosophy. I have a goalkeeper coach as a volunteer who's there all the time for the most part. A director of ops who's there every day. He used to be a researcher at Yale. He's got great insight in statistics and research. So he does a lot with the data, anything in Instat, anything that comes up, statistical analysis. I tend to do a lot of the video. I do all the defending. Steve does the attacking and attacking set plays. Shawnee now is, because she has sports science, will do warm-ups, play with the team and really focus on them, because she was a player at Central, had won 4 championships and gone to the NCAAs too. We have full-time strength and conditioning. Because of our medical program, we have full-time sports medicine, so that's year-round, and then we also have students coming and going. Again, going back to the educational component of the program, I always use the student staff, so we bring them as well. So they might help with taping, massage, recovery, which is unusual. We have full-time sports information, again, going back to the program and the sports journalism, and they'll travel with us as well and be around all the time. And because of the nature of the program, we've constantly got like a media element that's above and beyond the level of the program maybe, but because of so many programs in the school that are and students looking to go to ESPN, we have in-house TV stations, sports production, all of that, so that's good. We have access to a nutritionist, Dana White. We have Devin Markle, who's sports psychology, and they work with us full time. And then we also use, because of the medical school, we use a sports performance lab. So Dr. Juan Garbelosa is also part of our staff, where he does training. So like this January, when we come back in, the players will do biomechanics, all testing, VO2, blood lactate. So while I only have 2 full-time with me, I actually have this extended staff that we use. So the players can come and get all the advice. And then I'm not an expert in sports psych, so they can go to the person that is. I'm not an expert in strength and conditioning. I'm not an expert in nutrition. So I'd say that's the biggest takeaway for me, is that even if we didn't have full-time resources, so many schools have experts on their campus that they don't use. So that was one thing that I took away probably about 10 years ago. I reached out to Juan, who was doing all this research and ACL injuries and prevention. And when we didn't have full-time support, we were doing a lot of work with him and research. And then the same way, I needed someone to do a video and I needed someone to edit and put stuff together. So I went to the communications department, and we got a GA every year for 3 credits to work with the team, taking videos and putting videos together. So that's sort of morphed into, now all of a sudden I have this staff, and it's great, but it's we always use the term stay in your lane. So everyone knows their role. Everyone stay in your lane and do your role, and do your role to the best of your ability. So I have a couple of young strength and conditioning and sports medicine staff members, both female, coincidentally, but they're not used to me telling them, you're the expert, you do your job, you tell me if the player can play, you tell me if they're fit, you tell me. I'm not going to second guess you. So that's the way the program is run. I don't overrule them. I don't second guess. My staff will argue about lineup. Ultimately, I have to make the decision. But in terms of the actual expertise within the program, I let them do their job. And then at the end of the year, and we always have meetings about what can we do better. Let them have their input. So we meet after, we were supposed to meet last week, but the whole staff will all meet together and everyone will present. So even though we won the league, and even though we went to the NCAA, we're still going to sit down and everyone's going to say, this is what we can do better in each area. You know, it's a concept of marginal gain, so to speak. So our goal is then to build on, don't settle for saying, yeah, it was a great year. Tell me what we could have done better. Tell me what you've sat on all year in nutrition and saying, hey, they should have eaten at 2 hours before the game, not 3. We should, like sports psych, she sees all the players and confidentiality wise, but she might say to me, give them an extra mental health day, in preseason, give them another day off physically, mentally, no soccer, no nothing, do more activities based on the team bonding. So whatever they say, we'll plan and understand that we've got to take something out. So yeah, I rely on that expertise. That's probably for me is the biggest change in my time. 15 years ago, 5 years ago, I was running the program on my own, and now all of a sudden I've got to manage a big staff. So that's been an evolution in and of itself.
Yeah, it sounds like it, but it sounds like you're in an enviable position. I think that most coaches would love to have all those
Yeah.
expert staff at their fingertips. So, well, Coach, you've been really generous with your time. We've covered a lot of ground. I always like to end these with the same thing, and that's what didn't we cover? What else would you like folks to know, whether it's about the college recruiting process, about your school, or anything else? I'll leave you with the last word.
No, I'd say from a recruiting perspective, because obviously your target audience is players and coaches, is just to be honest in the process, and not to overlook schools. I mean, again, the educator in me is I don't get upset when players don't come to Quinnipiac. Players have to find their fit, and I just wish coaches and parents would understand that a little bit. Dave Nolan at Georgetown and myself, we grew up together, and Dave made a comment to me a long time ago, and I've started to use it and steal his philosophy that when a player makes a decision not to come to Quinnipiac, I used to get frustrated and upset. Now I don't care, and I don't mean it in a total ambivalence way. I mean it in the sense that that player has to make that decision. It's a life-changing decision for her. It's not a life-changing decision for me. So it affects her for the rest of our life. It only affects me until the next player commits in that position. So these clubs and these coaches and these schools that get upset when a recruit leaves or doesn't get picked them, just say, listen, it's in the best interest of the kid. Let them choose their own path. And then there is a school out there. But going back to the honesty is, the soccer world's very small. I'm sure if we start talking about coaches, even in Florida, I've been down at IMG, it was like a second home in my time with US Soccer. So I know people down there, and then all the different clubs as well. There's people that I've come across that live and work in Florida. And Mark Krikorian, when he was at Florida State, started at Hartford, and Franklin Pierce prior to that. We were good friends. So, a lot of these players, coaches, schools, it's a very small world. So don't play one off against the other. Understand that it's a very, very small circle of connections. So, be honest and respectful when you're talking to everybody, and hopefully the coaches are in return. And, good luck. It's a playing soccer, whether it's Division 1, 2, and 3, NAIA or junior college. And I'm not one of those Division 1 snobs. If you can have 4 years and someone gives you an education or helps pay for your education through soccer, enjoy it. It's a great ride. And don't forget, you're one of the top 1% that's fortunate enough to play a college sport and your sport. So, good luck and enjoy the experience.
I love it. Well, and who knows, our paths may have crossed when I was down at IMG running the old tournaments there about a decade ago. But well, if you get, are you your Connecticut girls coming to the Florida ECNL event in a couple
we'll
weeks?
Be there. Yeah.
All right.
My 17s and the 16s will be down there. So we'll be at the ECNL event.
All right. Well, I'll check your schedule and swing by and say hello. I'm 3 miles from those fields. So
okay. Yeah, Lakewood Ranch was like a second home for me with US Soccer. So
yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
All right, Matt. Thank you.
Take care.
All the best.